Hi everybody, and welcome back to Mother-in-Law Stories. Most of the mother-in-law horror stories that we've read come around the time of the wedding planning and wedding reception and all of that. Well, today we have a longer story that details the wedding chronicles, as OP calls it. But before we begin, don't forget about Los Genre AITA Daily, a channel dedicated exclusively to Am I the A-hole? Now let's get started with the first story. My mother-in-law did the typical behavior of liking me while I was dear husband's girlfriend, but brought out the horns and pitchfork when he proposed. Wedding planning was a very difficult time in our relationship. There were so many fights that I have decided to break this up in 3 parts. Part 1. The guest list fiasco. Let's start with the guest list. Dear husband and I each started gathering names and addresses of people that were special to us and that we wanted to share our wedding day with. Dear husband has a very large family with lots of aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. He asked his mom for help to make sure he didn't leave any of them out by mistake. That itself was the mistake. Mother-in-law took this request for help and used it to try to invite everyone that she had ever met to our wedding. We are talking about neighbors from 20 years ago. Dear husband was 19 when we got married. Former workers, friends from high school that mother-in-law hadn't spoken with since she graduated, distant acquaintances, you get the idea. The list got way out of hand. Most of these people had never met dear husband in his entire life and probably wouldn't know who he was. I'm a big believer that the first time you meet someone should not be at their wedding or their funeral. We had space limitations on the number of guests, so I made a deal with dear husband. He could invite anyone on mother-in-law's list if he knew who they were based on just looking at the name, and he had to have previously met them sometime in his life. Seemed rather generous to me since his side of the guest list had already caused me to have to trim my friends and family to accommodate all these people that mother-in-law swore needed to come to our wedding. After many arguments and mother-in-law for months refusing to turn over mailing addresses for these people that were on the trimmed down lists, we got the invitations sent out. Unfortunately, mother-in-law still tried to have her way. I found out later, from my flower girl of all people, she was an innocent party to all of this, that mother-in-law had taken her invitation, photocopied it, and sent it to the people that dear husband had trimmed off the list. Oh my god, I was furious! She never even told us she had tried to invite, we estimate, over 100 additional people to our wedding reception. Thankfully, these extra invitees must have had more manners than my mother-in-law because they recognized that the invitation was a fake and didn't attend. I'm also glad that they didn't feel obligated to send us a gift just because crazy mother-in-law decided to invite them. A few sent cards congratulating us, which confirmed what the flower girl told me about the photocopies because they wouldn't have known about the wedding otherwise. And this takes us to part 2. The flower conundrum. Along with the fights over the guest list, mother-in-law also caused a lot of drama about the flowers. Not the most common thing to fight over in wedding planning, but that's my mother-in-law. She wanted to make the bouquets out of silk flowers. She convinced dear husband, who had never seen her make anything like this before, that she would do such a nice job that it would look better than real flowers. My parents had already offered to pay for real flowers for me, and money wasn't an issue. You would think that it was the end of the world for mother-in-law that I didn't want her flowers from the way she carried on. After one last guilt trip-filled argument with mother-in-law, I decided that I wanted to have real flowers, not her fake arrangements. I am so glad that I made that decision. She convinced now ex-sister-in-law to go along with her fake flower idea when she got married. They turned out to not be made of silk, but were very cheap plastic flowers. I was at ex-sister-in-law's wedding party, so I got one of the fake arrangements. The thing was hideous. It looked like a 5-year-old tried to put them together. Mine actually fell apart in the middle of the ceremony, and I had to reach down to pick up the large section that fell off. As a peace offering, since mother-in-law seemed determined to make something for our wedding, I offered to have her help me make the centerpieces for the tables at the reception. I am a bit artsy-crafty when needed, especially since we were on a tight budget for decorations. I gathered all the materials and set the date and time with mother-in-law. At the appointed time, my maid of honor and I went to mother-in-law's house and found no one home. Mother-in-law and father-in-law had vanished for the day and didn't call me to tell me. My maid of honor and I went inside. We sat at her kitchen table all afternoon, making the centerpieces that were intended to be my peace offering to let her help with something. I went home with my completed decorations and told dear husband about his parents' disappearing act. He was really angry that she stood me up after the fits she threw about wanting to be involved. And this now takes us to part 3. The reception site war. Even choosing a site for the reception was a big fight. This issue still makes my blood boil years later. Dear husband and I had booked a church for the ceremony. In small towns like ours, preachers also have regular weekly jobs to go along with their Sunday job. So we spent a lot of time playing phone tag with the preacher about different details. One day, the preacher left a message letting us know, since we had already booked the church for the afternoon, we could also use their back room for our reception if we wanted. We left messages for each other back and forth about the size of the room, tables and chair availability, parking, etc. At one point, he mentioned to us that since it was a place of worship, alcohol wasn't allowed on the grounds. Dear husband and I talked about it, and it wasn't a big deal to us. We were both underage, 19 and 20. Our friends were all underage, and my family doesn't drink. The lack of alcohol didn't bother us. But his family was mad at the mere thought of not being able to get drunk at a reception. As if the entire point of a wedding is to provide an excuse for alcohol consumption instead of celebrating the bride and groom. Now, over the course of several days, we found out that the church room was too small for our wedding reception. Remember the guest list issues? So, we booked an alternate site which was large enough and also allowed alcohol. While we were playing phone tag with the preacher, dear husband mentioned to mother-in-law the possibility of using the church and the booze-free requirement if the reception was held there. She told us to our faces that she had booked an alternate site for the real reception where his family and booze would be. She said that no one in dear husband's family would be caught dead at a reception without alcohol. They would all be at the real reception that she would host. She told me that dear husband would be attending this real reception without me because I wasn't invited. You are reading that correctly, and I am unfortunately not exaggerating. I, the bride, was not invited to her real wedding reception. Karma eventually caught up with her. She finally realized that dear husband was going to be at the reception with me, the one that we booked, which allowed alcohol. She had to cancel her reservation at the other location and lost a booking deposit of a few $100s. And this takes us to the bonus and final part of this story, the tipsy bridal shower. My bridal shower was an interesting experience for my friends and family, as this was the first time many of them met my mother-in-law. My maid of honor threw me a wonderful shower. Like you would assume, due to my age, it was a non-alcoholic event at a local restaurant. Everyone seemed to have a good time except mother-in-law. She brought a big gulp-sized cup filled with what smelled like straight rum and very little mixer. It was half gone when she arrived and entirely gone when she left. She was completely wasted. She sat in a far corner and glared at everyone during the entire shower. She did not participate in any games, conversation, or anything else. When she tried to stand, she was unable to stand still. She was so drunk that she was wobbling back and forth on her feet. I had to deal with my friends and family asking about her for months afterward. I still don't have a good answer as to why she felt like she needed to get drunk. She's not an alcoholic. Maybe she was washing down the sorrow of knowing her baby boy wasn't under her thumb anymore. Wow, OP, your mother-in-law sounds unsufferable, but it sounds like you can really manage her, which is fantastic. And also, It's great to know that your husband has your back whenever you have these confrontations with her. So congratulations, OP. And now let's move on to the next story. My mother-in-law has been crappy to me since the day we met. My husband is Indian, and I am not. On my first visit to their home, his mother saw an Indian actress on TV. She told her son that he should go to India to meet her, right in front of me. Then, after telling me how nice I looked, she went on to tell her son that I looked like a floozy, in a skirt past my knees and a blouse up to my neck. A few weeks later, when he told his mom his intention to marry me, she freaked out and he ended up moving out of her house, for which he was paying the entire rent. He moved in with me since I had my own place. His mother called him, no joke, over 20 times per day, harassing him and guilt-tripping him. His brother had passed away 5 years before our wedding, and she was always comparing them, telling her existing son that he's not as good as his brother and making him feel guilty about everything. She loves to get attention. Everything must be about her, so, of course, his relationship with me was all about her in her pathetic mind. Throughout the next year, her psycho behavior progressed. She was extremely kind to me, though I always saw how phony it was. Then, she was extremely mean, saying horrible things about me, even though I was constantly kind to her. I try to spend time with her and get to know her, and I try to introduce her to new activities so she can have her own life. Even my sister-in-law harassed us. She was obsessed with her brother, and I feel she secretly pretended he was her boyfriend. She's 1 year older than he is always telling us how she's more life experience because she's been alive 1 year longer than us. Even though she lives at home, she has never held a professional job, is 24, and has never dated in her life. She told my husband, boyfriend at the time, that she could see in my eyes that I didn't love him and that he should just leave me and focus on his family. The breaking point was for a short period. His mom was very nice to us and I thought the worst was over. She suggested that we move in with her to save money since we were saving for our wedding. And since he was paying his parents' rent, if we lived together, we'd only have one rent to pay. Well, we agreed, and she was so excited and nice about it. But 5 minutes after we settled in, I overheard her telling her son that I would have to follow her orders, clean for her, and that she would be telling me how to dress. She said some other horrible things about me, and I decided to go stay with my parents. My boyfriend and I called to get our apartment back, but it would take 2 weeks. While I was at my mom's, his mom concocted this story that she was missing all this jewelry. And guess what? She accused me of stealing it. This infuriated both her son and me. He knew she made it up, but it got worse. I went to face her to see if she had such a lack of ethics and morals that she would lie to my face. The jewelry was never missing. I went and told her that I would never do something like that and that I am a good woman from a good family. She sat there and cried that I stole from her. I told her that I didn't have to listen to her and my man and I left. I didn't speak to her for 3 months. The only reason we spoke after that time was because his grandmother passed away and I felt sorry for her. We got engaged the next month and a new misery befell us. We were paying for our own wedding, but his mother wanted to plan it, down to where it was held and the date we would wed. Mind you, this woman is cheap, tacky, and she hates me. I was not about to let her plan my wedding. She made unrealistic demands and said that if her son didn't obey her wishes for the wedding, then she would never accept me because I was only worth pennies. You can bet we didn't invite her to the wedding. The day before, she called and apologized, though it was fake as hell. She came to our wedding, but we told her it was later than it actually was so that she wouldn't be present at the ceremony, because we knew she would attempt to ruin it. This may sound paranoid, but if I told this story with more detail, you would see our worries were valid. After we were married, she threw a traditional Indian party for us on which the invitations only listed my husband's name. When we were in front of her family, she was so nice to me because she's a phony witch who doesn't care about who she really is, only what others think of her. Now, we've been married for 8 months and I am 3 months pregnant. I wanted this event to be the first one that his mother didn't ruin or suck some happiness out of. No such luck. She clearly expressed her unhappiness about this child. Even though my husband is very successful and we can more than provide for this child, and we planned this pregnancy, she said that I was the devil and that she never wanted our baby in her home. She went on to say horrible things about me, which worked out to my advantage because my husband isn't forgiving her for this. He has completely eliminated her and his sister from our lives. We have even had a will drawn up stating that in the event of our deaths, my mother is to be the legal guardian of this child, and also we stated that his mother is to have no visitation or contact at all with this child. My husband's mother even told him that on the day he was born, he brought her bad luck for the rest of her life. I can't let my child be exposed to that. My husband never walked away from his mom before because he felt sorry for her. But our love is special and unique. I was never scared off by his mom because all the interfering in the world couldn't diminish our love. But that doesn't change the pain I've endured at her hand. It has been hell for my husband and me. I am just glad that she's out of our lives forever. Whoa, OP, you are lucky that your husband has such a strong spine to cut his mom out like that forever, and actually put her out of the will considering your son. Wow. She does sound horrible, narcissistic, and meddling. Yikes. But anyways, you guys seem to have it under control, so good for you. And so we've reached the end of the video. I truly hope you guys liked it. If you did, just go ahead and click like, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, don't forget to check out my new channel, the link's in the description. And finally, go ahead and visit the Lost Genre subreddit where you can share your own stories or cross-post stories from other subs. And having said all of that, I will see you guys in the next video.